of lottery winners can stir our imaginations. We start dreaming about what to do with all that money. $1 billion. Oh, to be carefree and be on a permanent vacation from work or whatever it is. Even imagining giving some away to someone special so they could be set for life. Or finally having that truck that you've always dreamed about. Maybe building a new house with a water slide that goes from the upstairs down out to the swimming pool. I mean, why not? We sure can spend up some imaginary money pretty quick. A not so fun fact, a large percentage, somewhere in the range of 70% of lottery winners end up bankrupt. The reality check can be a buzzkill. Mishandling a fortune sounds unfortunate, but fortunately there is hope to be treasured and an abundance that we already possess that we can graciously give away. If you know the situation when Jesus multiplied 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, you know the workings and the miracles of Jesus, providing an abundance out of this small portion because of his compassion for people. But here's part of that scene. John chapter 6, starting in verse 3. So Jesus went on up the mountainside and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Jewish feast of the Passover was near. Then Jesus, when he looked up, he saw that a large crowd was coming to him, said to Philip, "Where can we buy bread so that these people may eat?" Now, Jesus said this to test him, for he knew what he was going to do. Philip replied, 200 silver coins worth of bread would not be enough for them, for each one to get a little. One of Jesus' disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "Here's a boy who has 5 barley loaves with 2 fish, but what good are these for so many people?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was a lot of grass in that place. So the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed the bread to those who were seated, and then did the same with the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were all satisfied, Jesus said to the disciples, "Gather up the broken pieces that are left over, so that nothing is wasted." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with broken pieces from the 5 barley loaves left over by the people who had eaten. Now, when the people saw the miraculous sign that Jesus performed, they began to say to one another, "This is certainly the prophet who has come into the world." Then Jesus, because he knew they were going to come and seize him by force to make him king, withdrew again to the mountainside alone. I love how John and the other gospel writers give us specific details. Like right here when he points out that there's a lot of grass for people to sit in. And then there's in a totally different scene when Jesus turns water into wine, John gives us the number of jars being 6 and that they were stone jars. And he also gives details for what those jars were used for. And it's these types of details when we pay attention. We need to pay attention to them because they're there for our understanding. There's a story of a state trooper way off the beaten path that sees a man walking down the road and with one shoe on. Seeing if he needed any help, the trooper asked him, "Hey, did you lose a shoe?" And the man smiled and said, "Nope, I found one." See, the details fill in where the assumption falls short. And they're there for a reason. These details give the story depth, and they're important in that they're eyewitness details. And sometimes we miss them, but we need these details for the whole picture. Especially for us now, we're thousands of years removed from this actual event. We're used to just focusing on the miracle itself, and that's powerful to do so. But if we don't pay attention, we can miss out on the fullness of power in that miracle and the power of Jesus, as well as the intentions of the writer in presenting this whole scene. The miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 men being that there was 5,000 men were counted, so that's just who were counted. There's way more. This is a big number of people. Jesus, sitting with his disciples, sees this crowd come in, this big crowd, and then he starts thinking of their well-being. You know, how is this crowd going to get something to eat this far away from the McDonald's? He starts asking his disciples how to handle the situation. Where can we buy bread? Philip crunches some numbers and gives a low guesstimation that doesn't cover this huge crowd. And Andrew comes in with a boy who is carrying basically a small meal for only a few people. It isn't going to feed the whole everybody that just travels and is disciples of Jesus. That's probably not even going to feed them, not to mention 5,000 plus people. To which Andrew even says, what difference is this little meal going to make? What's this going to do? Well, there's something about the details of that small meal, the fish and bread, specifically the barley loaves. There is a scene from 2 Kings chapter 4 that the prophet Elisha miraculously feeds 100 people with, you guessed it, barley loaves. Now a man from Baal Shalisha brought some food for the prophet, 20 loaves of bread made from the first fruits of the barley harvest, as well as fresh ears of grain. Elijah said, set it before the people so they may eat. But his attendant said, how can I feed 100 men with this? He replied, set it before the people so they may eat, for this is what the Lord has said. They will eat and have some left over. So he set it before them. They ate and had some left over, just as in the Lord's message. Elijah's attendant asks a similar question, and Andrew asks something. They're asking the same question. How is this little bit going to feed so many? And then there it is. 100 people ate, and there's some left over. And now in John's scene, a lot more than 100 people are being fed here on way less than 20 barley loaves. This is way more than 100 people. We're talking 5,000. This is a small meal divided up to where they were able to eat. And then not only are they able to eat, there's leftovers, a bunch of leftovers. Here's another detail, 12 baskets full of leftovers. It's above and beyond. It's way above and way beyond. And it's the similar work through the prophet Elijah of the Lord's work in the miraculous, but now intensified and expanded in Jesus Christ, working with less, yet providing more. There's the abundance. And after this happening, these folks who got their bellies full miraculously saw this power, and they're talking to each other about what they know. And they begin to talk about a promise from the words of Moses in Deuteronomy when he said that the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him. They remember that. They see this word from Moses coming to fruition in the miracle and what and how they just ate, saying this is certainly the prophet who has come into the world. And Jesus knew what was going to happen. And if he stayed there, this same group, they would take him by force and make him their king. So he withdrew to be alone on the mountainside. The miraculous happenings, it's a major step up from what happened with Elisha. But what links Jesus, it's him linking him to be a prophet like Moses. This is what these people longed for. They were waiting with anticipation for one like Moses to come, the Messiah, one who is mighty to save, who would provide a turnaround from being oppressed, who would provide more than what they could ever dream of. And they're in search. And we're in search of that miracle right now. We could probably start a club with people who are in need, something impossible to happen, who long for healing, who so desperately are in search for the next big thing. If only we had that $1 billion, if only. Another not so fun fact, your chances in the lottery are 1 in 302.6 million. You have more of a chance of becoming an astronaut, being struck by lightning, or being killed by a vending machine than you do of winning the lottery. So what do we have? Being too narrow-minded and focused on the miracle, we can miss the details of what was happening in that grassy land where over 5,000 people are gathered. What did they have? Well, they had a little boy. He's willing to give up what he already had in his possession. The scripture doesn't say whether the boy offered his meal or they asked him for it, but we know for sure he had it. It was in his possession. So instead of spending imaginary money, what is the possession that you already carry, that you have in the closet, that you have in a storage barn, that is packed away in an attic, that God could use for his glory? What do we have to offer right now? This isn't a getting ready to pass the plate kind of a talk here. This is more about what we own that we could freely give, that we could possibly sell and give to those in need. What do we already have? We don't need to wait for the next big thing. We don't need to go and to get something else. There is no addition needed in this subtraction from your possessions. And then we get to watch and wait for God to do some multiplication. A friend of mine grew up with a youth leader that would ask the question, talking about the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he would ask, what's your 5-2? What are you going to do with what you already have? So I'm going to ask you, what's your 5-2?